Mika Talaferro, Deputy Director, and Christopher DeFusco, CIO, along with members of our executive staff and representatives of our deferred comp carrier nationwide, in case there are any questions in that area.
Okay.
Thank you for inviting us today to talk about our budget testimony. I'd also like to thank the members of council with whom we've met during the past year and prior to that for your input and ideas on strengthening the plan. We consider it a true partnership in order for our mutual goal of making the plan stronger going forward. While our budget request is slightly higher, 3.8% than FY18 estimated obligation levels, it remains lower than the amount requested in 4 of the last 10 years. This funding will maintain staffing at its optimal level and covers fringe benefits as well as a scheduled 2.5% raise for the board's District Council 33 represented staff. The demographics of our staff are 70% female, 61% African American, 4% Asian American, and 2% Hispanic. The plan's funding percentage increased from 44.8% to 45.3% as of July 1st, 2017. Last Wednesday, the board voted to once again reduce the assumed rate of return, going from 7.70% down to 7.65 and then 7.60 over the next 2 consecutive fiscal years. The board has reduced the assumed rate of return a total of 115 basis points or 1.15% over the past 11 years. The board also updated other underlying factors such as mortality tables and payroll growth assumptions. Per the board's actuary, while the funding ratio may appear to reflect lack of progress in funding, the decrease in the assumed rate of return represents improvement in the fund's risk profile, improving the likelihood of achieving the assumption in the future. The fund's investment return for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2017 was 13.08% net of fees. The return for calendar year ending December 31st, 2017 was 15.4%. Through March 26, 2018, despite extreme volatility in the worldwide markets, the fund's fiscal year return to date was 6.60%. The returns for all those periods exceeded those of the fund's policy index benchmark and were among the top quartile of public pension funds. You may recall the fund's portfolio was restructured following the board's decision in fiscal 2016 to divest from all but one hedge fund and many other underperforming high-cost investment products. The redemptions of these high-fees, actively managed investments is almost complete, resulting in a drastic reduction in investment fees paid by the board from $33.5 million, an investment ratio of 0.69% in fiscal 14, to $15.7 million, an investment ratio of 0.33% in fiscal 17, an overall reduction of 53% during that time frame. Passively managed investments now account for approximately 57% of the fund's assets, up from roughly 29% just 3 years ago in December of 2014. Using our investment manager database, the board once again conducted a utilization study to determine the universe of diverse investment managers that meet the fund's criteria, which is having a 3-year track record and at least $100 million in assets under management. The results are that 9.3% of firms and 5.23% of products had greater than 50% minority or women ownership. The fund's current lineup of investment managers includes 21.5% diversity managers, far surpassing the universe that the utilization study revealed. Diverse plus local managers are approximately 30% of the portfolio. The board continues to seek out high-quality, diverse, local, and emerging managers for allocations across all asset classes. Also noteworthy is that both Rumline Index products, which represents 40% of our fund, and Causeway, which represents 3.9% of our fund, do not qualify under the City of Philadelphia OEO diversity regulations, but both firms combined, women and minority employees exceed 50% of the firm and do qualify as diverse companies under regulatory schemes of other jurisdictions, such as the state of Illinois. Board members and staff continue to participate in the Middle Atlantic Plan sponsor, the National Association of Securities Professionals, and other nonprofit organizations that are proponents of diversity in the investment professional ranks. The board continues to be an active member of a national association called the 30% Coalition, which is an organization committed to the goal of increasing women participation on corporate boards. The board also continues to support proxy initiatives promoting issues such as inclusive corporate boards, equal pay, and other important social issues. The board has partnered with investment managers to encourage the creation and expansion of diversity outreach through internships, mentoring, and hiring programs. One of our local managers not only adopted a policy based on the board's suggestion, but a young man from North Philadelphia successfully completed an internship and was hired by the firm. Recently, our investment staff participated in a local education program for high school students called Investing Girls. Dominique, Erin, and Chris recently gave a presentation at the Palumbo School, and by all accounts, it was very successful. As a staff, we have periodically spoken to various local groups, including graduate classes at Temple University and the University of Pennsylvania. The board also received a certificate of transparency from the National Conference of Public Employees Retirement System in furtherance of our level of public disclosure throughout 2017. A large percentage of employees continue to use the deferred compensation program to enhance their retirement savings. There are currently 22,155 employees participating in the 457 plan administered by Nationwide. As of February 2018, the plan exceeded $1.135 billion in total assets. The board continues to provide retirement education sessions to system members, annually reaching thousands of employees through in-house training, as well as visits to various operating departments and participating in seminars for members of the police and firefighters unions. The board also participates in the Personnel Department's two-day onboarding seminar for new employees. We respectfully request that you approve our budget, and we'd be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Let me just run a couple questions the Council President had. One is, he wants to know what do you think is most important to the health of the pension fund? Is it the increased contributions of employees, or is it the conversion to a stacked hybrid plan?
So what the conversion to a stacked hybrid plan does for us in a positive way is reduces the future liability of the fund. And that's always important from an actuarial perspective, because when they project out into the future, they're looking at the future liability. If you look in our actuarial report, there's actually a funding percentage for each of the types of plans that we have. And if you look at Plan 10 and if you look at Plan 16, the funding percentage for both of those plans are substantially higher than the traditional plans. So I would say that those plans are very helpful, but I would guess what you would say the main issue with the fund is the unfunded liability. And a large portion of that is due to the legacy Plan 67 plan. I think it's probably close to 90 or exceeding 90%. I haven't done the calculation based on the most recent actuarial report. So again, I think attacking that liability, and part of that is something that the board has adopted and that the city has adopted and memorialized in the collective bargaining agreements, which is called the revenue recognition policy. The revenue recognition policy takes any additional contributions that the employees are making as a result of collective bargaining and the additional revenues from the sales tax, and that acts to pay down the unfunded liability above and beyond the MMO. So the key is it doesn't act to reduce the city's obligation under the MMO, but it acts as an additional payment on the unfunded liability. Our actuarial report this year, in showing why the funding percentage went up, the main mover of that was that we paid an additional 2.3% towards that unfunded liability, and most of that is attributable to the revenue recognition policy.
Okay, all right, I appreciate that. Just one more, Dan, I know you mentioned, because I know that council in general, the council president particularly, is interested in diversity of the portfolio managers. I think you quoted some figures. Is that in your written testimony, or?
I don't know if it's in the written testimony or not.
If not, maybe you could get that to us.
Yeah, we'll get that to you.
Just so we're clear on that, we can also
So
look.
it's 21.5% of firms, but as far as the fees for diversity managers, it's actually higher than that. It's closer to 28%
Okay.
for the fees for those managers.
Maybe you could get that
We
to
will-
the council president, because I know that's something that is raised a lot. And I know some of the members that may not be here right now, I know are concerned about that issue. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We recognize Councilman Dom.
Excuse the chairman. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I have a couple questions. One of the questions I'm not clear on is, for your full-time positions for next year's budget, how many positions are you budgeting for?
It's 77, is it, or 73? I can tell you in 1 second. 73.
73. So in 2017, you budgeted 73 also,
Correct,
but you filled 55,
correct.
and you had a tremendous good year as far as returns are concerned.
Yes.
Do you really think we need those extra 18 people?
I think we look at what's the optimal level, and I think we're probably close to the optimal level, so it's likely we may not need all of those people, but we'd be glad to do a detailed analysis on that.
I'd like you to do a detailed analysis at 55 that you have currently and not increase the 18, so we can save the money.
It may not need 18, but it will need some level above 55, because we do
Right.
have some vacancies that we're in the process of filling now.
I mean, on the positive side, you had a great year, so congratulations. You guys did a great job in returns. And we did it with 55 people. I just want to have the same performance with 55 people next year. I don't think we need more people if we had such a great performance.
Yeah, and I think if you look at our numbers of filled positions since I've been there over 7 years, it's been pretty steady the last 2 or 3 years. We're
And that's
looking for
great.
the optimal level.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
I think that is true, and I'd like to keep it at that level is my point. Let me ask you another question. We had a 15.4% return, I think it was, on the pen, which is phenomenal. And the pension fund's approximately $5 billion, I guess, right now?
Correct.
Does that mean we made about $770 million on our investments?
Chris?
I'm just doing the math.
Just identify yourself for the record.
Sorry, Chris DeFusco, Chief Investment Officer. No, because we would have money outflowing during the year. So we're paying approximately, and correct me if I'm wrong, Fran, about $800 million a year in benefit payments. So if we're paying out, let's say 70, 75 million a month, that money isn't there during the course of the year to realize those investment returns. So the number would be smaller. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I'm happy to get it for you.
I like the return number. I'd like to know how much in actual dollars
Sure.
we're adding to the fund based on that.
Sure.
So it's not 770 million, it's something substantially less, or?
So it's a matter of timing also.
Right.
I mean, we get our annual payment from the city at the end of March. So if the market went up in the period prior to us receiving the MMO payment, that principal would not have been part of the market increase. We're also paying out $800 million in benefits. So each month it's a certain amount. So it depends on when the market went up, when it didn't go up, and what money is in there.
I understand, I just want to know what the total dollar is.
Yeah, we'll
that
give
we
you
have
that.
returned, yes. And do you know what the funding ratio was at the end of 12/31 of 17, this past December? Were we at 45,
No, we
46?
wouldn't know the funding ratio. We only know the funding ratio at the end of every fiscal year.
Fiscal year,
Yeah,
okay.
that it's only calculated one time per year.
I'm trying to understand, by having such a great return, what is the impact to the funding ratio?
So it was 13.08 for the fiscal year, and the funding percentage went up 44 and a half to 45.3. Actually, it was 45.5 prior to the new assumed rate being put in last week, so that had a 0.2 of a basis point return. So roughly 0.8 of a basis point. I think the 13.08% had an effect on the funding ratio.
Okay, thank you. And our research tells us, tell me if this is right or wrong, the National Association of State Retirement Administrators found that the majority of plans in the United States as of 2016 have shifted their return assumptions to the 7.25 to 7.5 range. I know we're going to head down the next 2 years, you said, to 7.6.
Right.
Do you see us getting into the range of what the rest of the administrators are looking at?
I think the board is resolute on continuing to reduce the assumed rate going into the future. And,
Right.
and you're exactly right. Our experience study that was presented last week did show that the median was 7.5.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, since 1988, it says our returns have been 7.5, and since 2000, they've been 5.6, because we had ups and downs.
That's right.
Okay. In the, we call it the road to 80%, to get us to 80% funding in, I guess, 2030. The fact that our assumed rate went down, in that program, we were doing 7.7. Does that have any effect on that road to 80%?
So, when we get the final I have the draft actuarial report. It should be finalized within the next 2 days. Everyone on the council will get that. It's still showing, it's showing a chart with varying returns averaging 7.65% going forward, what the projections are, and it's still getting us to 80% in 13 years.
Okay, good.
And that's without the DC 47
Right.
or fire contracts, whatever happens with those.
So the MMO levels, the city's contributions over the next 13 years, according to the chart, are like 10.7 billion into the pension fund, the MMO.
Okay.
And it equates to about an average of 821 million annually that we're putting in. In 2019, the MMO is 700 million, but the payouts, as you mentioned, were about 821, the retirees was about 880 million. So we're paying out right now 880 million and putting in 700 million.
So, yes, if you include drop and people who withdraw from payroll,
Oh, I know.
it gets over 800 million. It's around 760 fixed benefits right now, 760 million. So yes, it's a negative cash flow situation, which is, according to the actuary, what we're doing with the revenue recognition policy, again, which has been formalized in the collective bargaining agreements, is a nice feature for gradually attacking that negative cash flow, and that will have a long-term positive effect on what you're describing right now.
And the projected MMO for the next 4 years is 2019 at 703, 2020 at 709, 2021 at 719, 2022 at 734, and we're still going to be way below what the payouts are of 880 million.
That's right.
And so in 23 to 30, at some point we have to catch up. From 23 to 30, are we going to have MMO payments that are unbelievably high?
I think Rob can address the MMO payments going forward, but the MMO payments seem to level off at some point, if I recall correctly.
But what you're saying is we have negative, basically, cash flow for the next 5 years. We pay out more than we take in.
Right.
And then at some point, we got to pay the piper and balance this thing.
Right. No, that's correct. And that's again what this revenue recognition policy is intended to address. And part of that is employee contributions, for sure.
So the question, I guess, for you, Rob, is what do the MMO payments look like in 23 to 30?
And, one of the other things to note, too, is that we're not talking about earnings either. So earnings would go into the fund, too, on top of our contribution. So if you add those two together, that's typically
take it
more
up.
than the benefit
So-
payout.
So in your opinion, based on 15.4% return, what do you think the earnings were this past year?
I think they were going to get back to you on that, right? And
Some
just
idea.
as Chris said, the amount that's in the fund varies by time of year.
Is
So
it 200 million, 300 million, 150 million?
I would say 15%. You're probably in like 400 or 500 million range. Probably
Right.
400 or 500 million, I would
Okay,
guess.
so just for my benefit and everyone else's, that means that we, this year at least, MMO paid and had a higher, plus the returns were greater than what we paid out,
That's right.
far greater.
Yes.
And I think that's why the assets are now over 5 billion versus where they were last year, and that's why.
That should
yeah.
be part of the whole package, so everybody gets that detail.
Yeah, okay.
So we're actually in a better situation. We are making a dent in getting this pension obligation under control based on, as long as we get the returns on our investment plus the MMO.
Right, and the projections that the actuary makes that has us basically, getting to 80% fund within 13 years and paying the entire unfunded liability off by probably later in the 2030s, assumes the 7.7, and it'll show the new assumptions. But that combination of our employee contributions and earnings pays down the unfunded liability each year.
So based on this chart that you did from the road to 80% that gets us out of this problem in 2030, basically, how could these bond rating people actually lower our rating when financially we're going to be we're on a road to much better situation?
Yeah, so I think if they were, and we talked about this a little before, I think if they were looking at us in isolation and just not without looking at other cities, maybe we wouldn't have been downgraded, but other cities have healthier fund balances and higher funded ratios. And so I think they were looking at other cities that were in the A+ category. And I think that's probably what the rationale was.
And then just one other thing, Councilman, the MMO as a percent of projected payroll is projected to decrease by 1.2% according to the actuary into the next fiscal year. So you're right, the trend is going that way.
So in the road to 80%, do we count police, fire, DC 47, non-represented, exempt, and legislative employees as being part of the new stacked hybrid pension plan?
In the
Yes.
actuary report,
We did.
it's not counted
Not
in the
in-
actuary
right.
report.
But
No.
in your analysis, Rob, it's in there that way?
Yes.
And do you see any problem with us being able to accomplish that?
We're hopeful that we will accomplish that in negotiations and in our awards.
Okay. And the pension adjustment fund, 2015 to 2017, the city paid 77 million in bonuses for the pension adjustment fund. Based on this upswing in the market, is it possible that fund could pay more bonuses to retirees even though it's still less than half funded?
So now, no, not for the current year, based on the returns that we had in the last fiscal year. Smooth over, it's the market return smoothed over a 5-year period, which brought us to 6.28%. So in order to pay out, you have to be 1 percentage point above the assumed rate of return, and then anything above that is subject to the PAF.
Last question. Since the 1960s, every union contract we have has allowed municipal employees, except police and firefighters, to include overtime earnings in their pension compensation calculation. Overtime paid now directly affects future obligations to the city's pension, which needs $7 billion. Is there any option of eliminating overtime when we calculate pension earnings for future contract negotiations?
So I'll defer to Rob, but that's certainly a subject of bargaining.
Right, it's subject to,
Bargaining.
you have to go through
Because I mean,
collective
that's a killer. And that hurts that pension dramatically, including that overtime. Okay, thank you for your answers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Just one more question. Pension obligation funds, what's the board's position on those? I know they're considered risky in some way, and I don't know how well they've been doing, so.
I think since he's the finance director, I'll let Rob answer that. But
Okay.
I
I know, Rob, you were trying to hide over there, but we found you.
No, I was hoping there was a pillow over there. I could take a little nap.
I know, yeah.
So I guess the issue with pension obligation bonds is you're really just switching one fixed cost for another.
Okay.
So it's not doing much for your overall financial health. It would help the the pension fund, I'm not sure kind of from an overall financial policy perspective that it's really helping.
Okay, all right, thank you. There are no other you have any? Councilwoman Gim?
Much. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
afternoon.
So I think a number of my colleagues have been asking a lot of questions, and many municipal governments have been asking questions about social impact investing and the importance of doing some of that work. You know, sometimes the standards around that have been, I know that there are some overtures that I think the pension fund has made around that, but increasingly there are more organizations that try to define a little bit about what that looks like. For example, like Principles for Responsible Investing. There's groups like the Human Capital Management Coalition that are taking a look at different areas around setting, you know, boundaries and structures for how to do more responsible investing. Has the pension fund joined for any of these coalitions or signed off on the Principles for Responsible Investing or taken a look at any of those things?
So, yeah, we are a member of several, well, concerning responsible investing, we are an active member of something called the 30% Coalition, which promotes board diversity, specifically women inclusion on boards. So that corporation, through us as a signatory, have moved to encourage boards through our proxy shareholder concentration to be more inclusive in their board policies, corporate bylaws in order to include more women and diverse boards. We've also done several other areas of social investing. I mean, we have either regulatory or statutory restrictions on some of our investments, and I think Chris can run down a list of those, but it runs from Sudan, Iran, North Korea, gun legislation, tobacco, Northern Ireland. There's a whole list of restrictions that we have where we cannot invest in entities that are involved in that. So yes, we're very active in that area, and we do support organizations and use our shares combined with often other public pension funds to ensure that corporations, to the extent that we can, do socially responsible things.
I understand that we generally have clarity around restrictions on investment. Are there, I mean, I guess one of the questions around, like, for example, PRI, whether you signed off on that, it helps establish a commitment to do primarily investing around environmental, social, and other areas. Is that something that we're signed off on? And
I think Chris can answer
That's
that.
not something that we're signed off on.
is that something that's of interest, or have you spent any time looking at it?
We're approached from time to time by various organizations. We look at, as Fran said, we have a myriad of restrictions that we're under in terms of investing personally or professionally at the moment. When something appears to be of sufficient interest and that needs to be brought to the board's attention or a subcommittee, we do that. I don't recall being approached by the particular organization that you're referring to, however.
Okay, maybe we can follow up on that later. What steps is the pension fund taking now to ensure that some of our employee funds are invested around local job creation in particular? Are there areas that you're taking a look at? And I think we've talked about that a couple of years ago.
So we have a database of local firms, and this is something you mentioned, I don't know if it was last year or the year before. We did a database of all the firms that are local and meet our minimum investment criteria, and that was 1.47% of investment firms. And as of 2/28, we had 8.06% of the fund's portfolio in local firms. So we far exceeded what's available even in the universe of local firms. Again, we're not New York or Chicago where there's a concentration of those type of firms, but we're 8 times as high as what the universe is out there. Concerning local jobs, I can give you an example. We have a local investment firm that we invest with, And when the board was interviewing them, when they came and gave their pitch to the board, we asked them about their diversity policy and about their policy for including diverse candidates in their fund. They did not have one. They actually created one because of our questions.
Okay.
And they also met with the African American Chamber of Commerce, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and they not only adopted a policy, but they started an internship program. And they not only have an internship program, but they hired a young man through that internship program from North Philadelphia as an investment professional. Not as someone working in the mailroom, not as a staff level employee, but as an investment professional. So other firms have heard about what we did with this local firm, and that is reverberating throughout the industry. So even firms that we have that are current investment managers are using internship programs, mentoring programs to enhance the diversity in the professional investment ranks. And we think at some point that will have an effect on expanding the universe of minority firms and diverse firms that we will have an opportunity to invest with in the future.
And we track our investment in minority and female-led firms?
We do. Of all of our portfolio, we have 21.5% in diverse firms, and that's out of a universe of 9.3% of firms nationally that meet our minimum investment criteria. And the amount of fees that we pay annually to diverse firms is 27.5% of all the fees that we pay.
And we're tracking that growth over time, or?
We track that every single day, and every month it's reported to the board in our information that we provide to the board.
And do you have any indication of how it's looked, say, for over a 5-year trajectory?
We do have that. It was when we first started this roughly 10 years ago, it was in the single digits, and that has increased steadily over the years. So yeah, the board it's something that's very important to the board, and something the board has made great progress on.
Okay, thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
Yes.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Parker, please.
Hello, and I apologize for coming in late. You know, I usually never get here late when your department is up. We were rushing from a meeting, so good afternoon.
No need to apologize, and we knew you would be here for pennies.
To both of you. I want, and again, if you already went over this and I just don't have it in front of me, I apologize. Help me with the total amount of our pension funds unfunded liability, and give me the amount that can be attributed to Plan 67 legacy costs.
So our funding level is 45.3%.
45.3%.
Which is up from where it was last year at 44.5%. The unfunded liability, part of the increase in the funding percentage, and this is attributable to something called the revenue recognition policy, which is taking any additional contributions that the employees have to make, plus the additional sales tax revenue, and putting that aside in what we call a notional account. So that amount is put in a notional account, and at the end of the year, that amount is not used to deduct the city's responsibility under the MMO. That's above and beyond the MMO, and that pays down the unfunded liability. So we actually made progress on the unfunded liability from an actuarial perspective of 2.3%, according to the actuary. So as the years go on, and this revenue recognition policy, by the way, is formalized in the collective bargaining agreements. So it's not subject to the whim of an administration. It has to be negotiated going forward because it's now in the collective bargaining agreements. So that has helped to pay down the liability.
Mr. Bailey, just for the sake of the members of the public who are watching, because I had the great honor of serving in the Pennsylvania General Assembly prior to coming here, I'm familiar with our minimum municipal obligations that we make. Also, when Philadelphia has been good fiscal stewards and we've contributed above and beyond. Explain what the MMO is for the public that's listening.
So the minimum municipal obligation is a state mandated minimum that the city must contribute to the pension fund each and every year based on State Act 205. And that MMO is composed of the normal cost plus the amortized unfunded liability. And that's the main part of the formula. So you're right, the city even last year paid a substantial amount above the MMO, and has done so, by the way, prior to the revenue recognition policy voluntarily over the last several years.
I've just never read that in any stories recently.
And you
so
probably
I
won't, yeah.
always just want you to get that on the record because everyone talks about what we don't do well. And I wanted to note that. Listen, you mentioned 45.3% funded. When we talk about the unfunded liability, what's the number? It was 5.7, then I heard it being 5.9, then I heard 6. What's that billion number?
So
now?
we just received the preliminary actuarial report, but the unfunded liability is approaching $6 billion, and over 90% of that, I don't have the exact calculation
Over
yet.
90% of that.
90% is attributable to the legacy Plan 67 liabilities, which by the way, no new employees have been going into Plan 67 since 1987. So.
I don't have again, and I apologize for this, I don't have the article in front of me, but I know I read something recently that talked about our performance, and it talked about Philadelphia doing well. What were they referencing? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I happen to have that. That was by Joe DiStefano, and this was through the calendar year, and after paying costs and fees, so this was net of fees, City of Philadelphia Board of Pensions through December 31st, 2017, returned 15.4%, surpassing PSERS, SERS, Montgomery County, and the New Jersey State Pension Fund. So
wait, PSERS, SERS, Montgomery County, and New Jersey?
Every single large fund in the surrounding area, we've had a better performance than for the calendar year, yes.
Tell me, Mr. Bielli, what do you attribute that to? I'm actually here looking at some notes that talk about us moving away from the direction of hedge funds, using the greater use of indexing. What do you attribute? I mean, I'm asking you, what was in the magic? What was in the formula?
So it's in a combination of all that. I mean, of course, the stock market's performed well, and that's always a help, no matter what your asset allocation is. But we did tweak our asset allocation a couple of years ago, and that was a conscious effort, a conscious decision to move out of the higher-priced alternative investments, such as hedge funds and distressed debt type of vehicles, which were costing us a lot of money and not performing well. We reduced our expense ratio, if you will, from 0.69% at the end of FY 2014, which represented approximately $33.5 million in fees, to 0.33%, which represented approximately $15.4 million in fees. That's a 53% reduction just in our fees alone over that 3 fiscal year period. One way to look at it is that's free money. Reducing your fees is free money. You don't have to do anything as far as market performance to make that money. So that's free money. And that was the main mover of what differentiated us from other public pension funds.
Now let me ask you, how does Philadelphia compare? Because I guess my question is, are active managers sort of beating index funds, like if you net the fees? And how does Philadelphia compare with other cities as it relates to sort of having passively managed funds versus actively managed funds?
So we're roughly 57% passively managed.
57,
And I think that would be low compared to Montgomery County, for example, but I think to other public pension funds, it would probably be above average, and that's a good thing. We did, and we're not against hedge funds as a general rule. We kept a hedge fund, and that actually was one of our best performing funds for the year. So we look at net of fee returns, and if it makes sense to pay a manager a little bit more, and we know that that manager is going to give us good returns, we have no objection to that. But it has to be the right manager, and they have to make sense to us and provide what's called alpha, which is return above what the market index could give us. Otherwise, all things being equal, we'll go with the index because you'll pay less.
Mr. President, if you will, Mr. President, if I could just have a minute or two for latitude. I've seen some people jump in, I don't know, a few minutes, Mr. President, is that okay? All righty. Listen, my last question is in regards to something that you know has been extremely important to me. Just the public, you understand the difference between defined benefit contribution pensions versus just DC, so defined benefit versus defined contribution. And so I'm looking at your strategic goals where we talk about increasing 457 participation. Just with employees who are working now. And I'm not talking about those who are retired and currently receiving a pension. I'm talking about those working and contributing. How many municipal employees does the city of Philadelphia have contributing to our pension fund?
We have 21,155 participants. Of that number, a large majority are contributing, and Chris could pull those numbers right now because we present that every single month. But that number has been going up every single year. We are very aggressive in providing education to the employees out there.
I'm sorry, Mr. Biella, I guess let me just go back and be clear. The total number of Philadelphia employees who are a part of our defined benefit pension system, what's that number? I'm talking about city workers, not 457, just in our pension fund.
Current active employees?
Current active employees, yes.
27,000 roughly, 27,000.
Okay,
roughly.
so that's where I'm going. So if we're at 26 to 27,000 active employees, right now you're saying that's where the 21,500, those are actively engaged in 457 contribution outside of the city's plan.
They're the current members of the DC plan, and Chris may be able to provide those numbers contributing.
So the current number as of the end of February 2018 contributing to the DC plan was 17,412. And then there was another 395 who were part of the optional add-on to the 401A.
Okay.
So we're at almost 18,000, a little under 18,000.
I asked you that, Mr. Bielli, because one, I think that your department has been very intentional about acknowledging that we should all have an understanding about behavioral economics. Nothing makes me more frustrated than to hear someone say, did you know that there was an opportunity to save and everyone's not taking advantage of it? I mean, behaviorally, if you are not accustomed to managing a portfolio and knowing how you should invest, you have to gain an understanding and awareness and a knowledge of it. And your department has been intentional in recruitment and intentional in marketing. I'm just hoping, Councilman Dom, I'm wondering if we can, marry EITC education and, contribution to the 457 plan. I don't know, but that's the kind of educational plan and a strategic overview that I would like to see us to continue to push and not assume that everyone automatically knows that this is something that they should be doing.
Yeah, we'd be happy to discuss that, participate in that. We have two representatives from Nationwide here, and we're fully staffed, and we have four professionals on site, one of which is a certified financial planner who is available free of charge to any city employee who wants to not only talk about 457, but any of their financial needs. And that's free of charge, a service that Nationwide provides to us. And they are on site, every day of the week, and they go out on location. I can give you an example. The Philadelphia Police just had a class of over 100 police recruits, and Deferred Comp was out there along with Ron Stagliano, our board member for the FOP, and they had 100% of new recruits sign up for the 457 plan. So, our people get out there and they make the advantages of the 457 plan known, not only to make additional retirement savings, but it reduces your taxable, your AGI. I mean, it's good in several ways, and we explain that to people, and people didn't know that, and they also don't know that if you're going to invest $50 a pay, it might only cost you $35 or $40 because it's pre-tax money. It doesn't necessarily, it's free money, right? You're getting $50 credit and you're only investing $40. That's a win, just like the fees are a win. So people don't always understand that, and Nationwide and our trustees do a really good job of explaining that to folks.
Thank you, Mr. President. While that will conclude my line of questioning, I just wanted to say kudos to you all for your success in management there. Again, outperforming PSERS, SERS, Montco, and Jersey. That was very pleasant to read. In addition to that, when folks think about your role and what you do, they think of investment management, but they don't think about the educational part of it, particularly relative to the behavioral economics associated with personal savings. So I just wanted to say thank you to you and your team for what you do, and we look forward to you having a better year even next year, okay?
Well, thank you, and before you got here, I mean this, is that we meet with several council people during the years, but we consider you partners in something that's important to all of us, which is the health of the pension fund. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Squilla.
Chair, I just want to say, too, I appreciate all the help that we get from pensions, because we have a lot of city workers who call our offices that have concerns, and you guys are always willing to help and respond, and, we don't get that from every department, so we appreciate what you give us and our constituents to help them along the way, especially when they're nervous about things that are happening in the future, and thank you for that, and looking forward to continue working with you.
You're welcome, and pensions aren't easy. We're still learning things every day, so I can understand how people have questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Dom?
I just wanted to bring up, I brought up maybe 2 years ago, I was wondering if you made any progress. PGW, we own, City of Philadelphia owns buildings that are not on PGW. They're an alternative supplier, and there's cost to convert. And Art Museum's one of them, there's other facilities that are like that. And I think the potential of income is about $3 million to $4 million a year that could go to PGW. Would there be an appetite by the pension board to invest as the lender for these institutions, to lend the money with 10-year paybacks so the return is 10%, not what you're making the market now, but higher than the overall rate, okay, with a 10-year payback. But the bigger picture here, and you know this probably better than anybody, is that adding $4 million of revenue to PGW on a 5 cap is adding $80 million of value to that entity.
Right.
Would that be something that the pension board would consider?
I think the board is always interested in looking at attractive investments that are relatively safe, in this case, backed by the city, relatively safe, and because the chief investment officer of the sinking fund works for me, yes, we might be interested in something like that, and certainly interested in evaluating it and talking about it.
Have you spoken to the people at PGW about that
We've
idea?
never been approached on that. I have never been approached on that. I don't know in a larger policy way
Right.
whether anyone else has.
We'll try to connect you, but I think it's like investing in ourselves.
Right.
And on top of you getting a great return, the city gets a great return in increasing the value of PGW.
Yeah, we don't shut off avenues for any attractive investment that is relatively safe and is, quite frankly, does not correlate to the market. We're always looking for uncorrelated investments, because that's what distinguishes you from, if the market starts swooning, you want some things that are not correlated to the markets, and that's just smart asset allocation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you,
You're
Mr.
welcome.
Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. There being no further questions, thank you all very much.
Thank
for
you.
your
It's
work.
always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. This committee will stay in a recess until 5 o'clock today, where we'll hear public testimony. Thank you very much.
Tell Ann we said hi. Nice job.